Serious, what's something creepy that has happened to you that you still occasionally think about to this day? By Ask Reddit.
Pretty sure I almost got kidnapped when I was a kid. I was 10 years old walking home from school and an elderly couple driving by stopped and asked me for directions. They were looking for the street I was walking towards, so I pointed them in that direction. Even though my directions were very clear, both were acting confused and asked if I can get in the car and guide them there and then they would drive me home. I told them it was fine, my house was right here, I lied. They were pressuring, guilting me a lot and being too nice about wanting to drive me home. It gave me a really weird feeling in my stomach. So I pretended to walk towards a house that wasn't mine and they drove off.
Smart kid.
Nice to note that old nice couple can also be kidnappers.
When I was 10 years old I lived in the middle of rural Alabama. We had some odd neighbors. Being curious kids, my friend and I followed my neighbor and his son and daughter one day when they left their house and walked into the woods. I was very familiar with the area because it was back when kids could roam free until the street lights came on. Anyway, we trailed them for about 2 miles, through the woods, across an old cemetery, and down a railroad. They stopped at a clearing beside the tracks and my friend and I hid opposite of them and watched. They started digging and kept pulling up bones and putting them in a bucket. We got scared and bolted. I immediately told my parents but they didn't believe me. I'm 32 and remember that day clearly.
I buried a roadkill bobcat I found once, and dug it up later to finish cleaning the bones to put them together as a collection. Hope your neighbors were doing something similar.
When I was maybe 10 I was over at a friend's house hanging out. Her neighbor was out of town and my friend was feeding the cat while they were gone. So my friend and I went over to feed the cat. Immediately upon opening the door, we heard someone walking upstairs. They were loud, heavy, slow footsteps, like didn't even sound human. My friend and I just looked at each other and sprinted back to her house. The worst part was we told her mom and the mom didn't believe us and made us go back and finish feeding the cat alone. We were terrified but did it. When the neighbor came back, they found that their house had been broken into. ETA, thank you for the awards. I've never gotten any before. As for my friend's mom's reaction, we were in upper-end suburbs in the early 2000s. At the time I think people thought these were incredibly safe with no crime, not the magnets for robbery they often were. It also probably totally sounded like we thought it was a monster, ghost. At that age we didn't really understand what it was. But definitely in the future when my kids are scared, even if it's a monster, I will know better to listen to them.
Did her mom ever apologize?
No, just brushed it off and was like, oh well, isn't that weird? No, Sharon, it was freaking scary.
A consistent plot point I'm noticing in a lot of these stories is negligent parents who either don't believe their kids or aren't taking the situation seriously.
Jesus Christ, parents, at least assume it's a possibility your children are telling you the truth.
I used to spend a lot of time walking through the woods, fields by my mom's house, and noticed a path one day that I hadn't seen before. I was listening to music following down this path as the trees around became more dense. You could tell it wasn't often people walked down there anymore. I remember it being more of mud, gravel trail. At this point I was deep in the woods, hadn't seen another person for a long time and shaded by the leaves of the trees. I don't know what made me notice at first, but I think I smelt the smoke. I stopped on the path, and maybe 5 meters away to my left in the trees was a small fire that had obviously been stamped out in a hurry, still burning embers and smoke, so it had been done only a few moments before. Cue me realizing there wasn't anyone around that I'd seen, and that whoever had stamped out the fire was hiding in the trees somewhere. I have never felt a gut feeling to run like I did in that moment, straight back the way I came and did not look behind me until I was back into the main woodland with people around. We'll never know if I was paranoid and it was nothing, or if I avoided something bad that day, haha.
I grew up in a decently rural area about 40 minutes outside a city. One of my neighbors had to call the cops once someone was back on their property late at night and had started a fire. Cops show up and arrest a man who had murdered his GF and was trying to burn the body. Dumbass pulled off the road thinking he was in the middle of nowhere and was actually only like 50 feet from the back porch of one house and in view of multiple. But yeah, when I would jog by that stretch of road, I'd run a little faster.
World's dumbest criminals moment there. Still, that's so awful, and I bet it's a creepy place now. It's scary what goes on around us. I was at an internal work event party at a fancy hotel in a different state. It was 80s themed. I started talking to some dude, I barely knew anyone there so I was trying to network, and he tells me he doesn't work for my company. Okay, no worries, I make a joke about free food. He stares me straight in the eye and picks up one of my French fries off my plate, dips it in ketchup and eats it without saying a word. I kind of freaked out and dropped the food in the trash and just walked out of the room and decide not to think about it. A few minutes later, there he is, staring at me. I change rooms again, I'm short so I hid behind people and pretended to talk to people I kind of recognized from my home office. He follows me, every few minutes I see him. I finally got the courage to approach a woman I knew the name of from some meetings and seeing her around the office. When I asked if the party had any kind of security, she immediately asked if it was about the dude in the blue jacket and white hat. Apparently she'd noticed him staring at me creepily, so I didn't have to try and convince anyone. Security took him away and everyone moved on, but I was scared and paranoid for the rest of the business trip. Edit. Thank you everyone who has sent kind words and awards. I was just telling my story for my own sake, but I'm glad so many people have seen it, and I feel for everyone who has had similar experiences. To all the people who keep sending me creepy messages, WTF is wrong with you that you read this and that's your response? Seriously, stop.
I'm glad she was paying attention.
This one makes me sad cause just thinking about you not knowing anyone and trying to genuinely meet people in a not super comfortable environment, and some creep does that poo. F that. Glad security got his ass and wish someone would beat the brakes off that dude.
I had a stalker in college. Had to move dorm rooms and building 4 times in the middle of the night. Friends would help me get to my dorm by pretending we were going to theirs and making sure no one was around when I'd go into mine. He found 2 of the dorms and left notes in my room. It's been over 11 years and I live in a completely different state, but every once in a while I get the feeling I'm being watched and panic.
I briefly had a stalker in college as well. I met him on Tinder and went on one really bad date where he told me he had in fact lied about his name and age, and I got freaked out and ended the date. A couple days later I left my apartment where he picked me up because of some unrelated roommate problems and was living in my car before the university gave me a dorm room. Then a couple days after that I get a call from one of the aforementioned roommates saying a guy dropped something off for me at 8 a.m. This dude lived in central New Jersey and I went to college in NYC. He made the trip out to give me a well-used hard copy of an album I had mentioned liking, apparently his favorite album from his personal collection, a drawing of us. He gave me disproportionate anime titties, it looked like a 13-year-old boy's idea of a sexy woman, and wrote a lung letter, the gist of which was, if I can't have you no one can. Thankfully I wasn't in that apartment anymore, but after class that day I saw him waiting outside my car in the university parking lot. The car where I lived. I knocked out of there really quickly and told the school, which is why they gave me the room to begin with. He kept texting me and I kept blocking him. He must have made 15 new social media accounts before he got the idea. I'm still scared of ever going to Central Jersey because I'm scared I'll run into him and he'll follow me home.
I'm so very sorry you went through this and are still going through this. I hope that one day you can find peace. Thankfully my experience was just as Facebook was coming out, so he never had that connection.
My mum used to start at work at like 3 a.m. and she was up at about 2 to 2:30 having her coffee. I heard her up and went to see her. She joked that she heard something outside, and me being a bit silly opened the blinds up wide as a joke, and there was a guy just standing there staring into the lounge room. That was creepy enough as it is, but what sticks with me is the fact he didn't run or really react for what felt an eternity. While I ran to get my old man and brother, apparently he just stood there and then slowly walked off.
This for some reason has always been one of my biggest fears, randomly looking out a window and seeing someone staring in.
That's why I have blinds and curtains. F that. I don't understand people who have those huge glass floor-to-ceiling windows in their house, like what you see in houses up in the Hollywood Hills or Manhattan premium apartments. F no. Give me small windows. With curtains.
Yeah, made me paranoid for years. Now I have roller shutters lol.
I was followed home once. I was 23 at the time, I'm female and I lived a 5-minute walk to a busy bar area. I noticed him following me and I went to a full-out run to get into my building. The guy also ran, but luckily by the time he got to the entrance to my building the glass sliding door had shut, automatic buzz door. The absolutely terrifying part was that as I stood there behind the glass catching my breath, he just stood there staring at me. Didn't walk away or anything. What in the hell was he planning to do if he caught me? Still gives me the shakes 5 years later.
This is why I really enjoy being a big guy. Even if I'm scared or in a really bad area, I can pretend to be a hard case. and know that people won't bother me. People probably think I'm weird, but when I review hostels or bars, I always mention cameras, safety doors, staff gender balance, etc. I don't know what it's like, but I can only imagine some women would rather not stay in a hostel with loads of dark hallways, corners, where random strangers just walk in. When I was little, I was sleeping over at my friend's house. I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, dark, far end of the hallway, away from her room. When I stepped out of the bathroom, her older brother was standing outside the door, in the dark. He never said a word, just walked up to me silently and put his hands around my neck. Someone stirred and he dropped his hands. I immediately called my mom and left without even saying anything. Friend never believed me, and I never went back.
I was 18 when I had my first long-term girlfriend. We ended dating on, off for 4 years. When we first started fooling around, she kind of clammed up and I backed off. On the car ride home, she explained that her last BF was very forceful and that it would take her a while to open up. I of course was understanding and offered comfort and was willing to wait. Things seemed fine for a while, but whenever we'd have trouble he'd kind of creep back into the picture. Usually through, I'm older now, AOL Messenger. He'd talk to her and then message me threatening me and telling me he was going to get her back. This went on our entire relationship. One time she called me hysterically because he'd shown up at her house and grabbed her, kissed her. He was always a huge strain on our relationship until about the 4-year mark, when she called me up really upset and asked if I would come over. She said she had made a big mistake. I was pretty sure she cheated on me and I dreaded it was with this guy. When I get to her house, she explains that this old boyfriend was her the entire time. I was catfished by my girlfriend for 4 effing years. Constantly harassed and threatened in my weakest moments nonetheless. It's been 20 years since then and it still messes me up when I think back.
Wait, so there never was a boyfriend, she just made the whole thing up? The F, was there ever any kind of explanation as to why? She's psycho, obviously, just wonder if there was anything else.
No explanation. I bounced a couple days later and cut off all contact. Took years to really sink in what actually happened.
Not that extreme, but one of my high school girlfriends from another school made up a bully. He would steal her phone, and text me how worthless and ugly she was, and would harass me over her phone or some random number I never saw before. I went to her school twice to meet him after school, but he never showed, only her. She never came clean, but once I caught her changing his name from what I remembered. It didn't work out.
Had a similar one, 3 friends sleeping over at his house. 2 of us were in one room and he was in his own. We both woke up to the door conjoining the rooms creaking open, and we saw him pointing a bow and an arrow at us. Didn't say anything, he just left after a few seconds. We just went back to sleep for some reason, but he denied it in the morning when we confronted him. No more sleepovers with him after.
What the actual F? He's straight out of that Kevin movie.
If you ever get in a chokehold, reach both your arms up and out from in between their arms, kind of like in breaststroke, then use your shoulder strength to press down, pry open their arms. That move is simple and surprisingly powerful, even when you're much weaker than the other person.
When I was 13, I was in a bookstore and a grown-ass man approached me in the manga section and started asking me about my love life, if I had a girlfriend, etc. I left and watched the escalator from outside to make sure I wasn't followed. Next thing I know, he's standing next to me and asks me to help him move a couch into his van. I kindly say F no and he jogs across the street and out of sight. I go inside and tell an adult, who responds, yeah, they've been getting complaints like that.
That's F-ed up. They be all casual like, oh that's just kidnapping Dave. He does get a bit frisky with the kids.
When I was in middle school, my girlfriends and I rode the bus home most days. The bus driver was this older guy who was super nice and fun and would allow us to play whatever music station we wanted, and he would drop us off at home last so we could dance around on the bus. I remember he would let us stand at the front of the bus while he drove, and he would purposely swerve to make us fall on top of him. I remember thinking it was weird, but it wasn't until I got older that I realized how wrong that all was. I decided to Google his name, I'm now in my 30s, and found that he is a convicted sex offender and is currently incarcerated. Scary part was when I think back, he obviously knew where I lived, and I remember there were several times when he'd drive past my house on the days I wouldn't ride with him. Keep in mind, driving past my house was out of the way of his normal route, so it was intentional.
I find it really upsetting that someone who seems generally nice, caring end up to be some effing lunatic.
When I was around 13/14 I was home alone, upstairs, when I heard somebody busting open the kitchen door yelling, "Fire, fire, get out." I didn't smell anything nor did I think that there was that could ignite a fire. I had ordered takeout and all the things that could set a fire were off, so I decided not to get out, and called 911 explaining everything. The police came, and found muddy footprints in the kitchen, along with the kitchen door busted.
It sounds like a failed robbery. Somebody realized that you were home, so the robbers needed to get the F out of there fast.
I was around the same age when there was a knock on our door in the earlier hours of the morning. It was a lady asking for help. My dad responded from the window, telling her that he would call the police to help her. She told him not to worry about it and that she was fine. She left. She didn't try any other house, and we heard nothing more of it.
I remember eating dinner once with my family and seeing the doorknob turn like someone was trying to get in our house, but fortunately the door was locked, so they just tried the knob a bit and then disappeared without a word. My parents just brushed it off as, oh, it was probably just some drunk who went to the wrong house, but it definitely still creeps me out to this day. Like, I always wonder what would have happened if the door wasn't locked.
This happened around 2008. One day I heard the voice of a young Indian man, about 18 to 20 years old, saying, "Hello, hello," while I was using my laptop. I had always kept the camera taped over, used virus software, periodically checked the download folders, etc. But when that happened I freaked out that I'd been hacked and went through every possible safety check again, down to seeing which programs were currently running, whether the neighbors were accessing my Wi-Fi, was it one of those loud pup virus ads, and if my camera or microphone permissions had been turned on. Couldn't find a thing. It happened 2 different times in the year after that. Same man's voice, too. I no longer use that laptop. And I still keep any laptop cameras covered, because God knows how that person got a hold of my computer.
Reminds me of the time I was up at like 3 a.m. mooching about online and suddenly a child's voice says, "I can see you." Scared the poo out of me. Turned out it was a pop-up ad in another browser tab. What a pooty effing idea for an ad. Way to guarantee I'll never buy your product, whatever it is. Man, this one is a doozy. I saw my abusive ex-stepmother in a grocery store. She immediately rushed over acting like she missed me or wasn't a sadistic prick. She had an old, ugly, greasy man with her. I live in a small town, so I can't exactly blow up at my abuser without being hounded and gossiped about and all that stupid poo. She pulls me in for a hug. I stand still. Then this man who I had never seen in my entire life pulls me into a really long, drawn-out hug. He was playing with my hair, telling me how pretty it was, and I think he sniffed it. I did the weird push-away thing you do when you don't want a hug and he eventually let go, but the nasty little F-er kept playing with my hair. I was like 13 or 14 and looked like it, so he knew that I was extremely off-limits, but that didn't stop him. The store we were in has a butcher shop in the back. The nice lady with a large knife invited me to go in the back and see if I could find and point out the meat I had mentioned before. I hadn't mentioned any meat. I was there for a pack of pepperoni. I'd usually avoid going into a secluded area with an unknown woman carrying a butchering knife, but I happily went back with her. I chilled in a corner for like 10 minutes while she chopped meat and watched me a bit, and then I decided the coast was clear, thanked her, and bolted. I didn't even get my effing pepperoni. I just wanted out. You can bet your ass I took a long shower with extensive cleaning. Effing nasty. Recent events have brought that memory up, and I wish I could go back and thank that lady, but I don't know if she'll remember me. I've thought of telling her boss that she saved me from an abusive pedo duo, but I don't want to get her in trouble for letting me into a staff-only area that probably has health regulations. I'll never forget her, though.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.